Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire on SportsGrid. Today is Thursday. We're almost there. AFC and NFC championship games coming up. We got lots of news to go over. A major change in the coaching ranks in the National Football League. We'll review that. Also, we've got Matt Lutovsky from Sporting News coming up in just a few minutes. We dive into the latest in sports wagering, the business side of it. And Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report is our guest contributor today on the show, as well as Brady Kannon. Big golf tournament that's getting underway. We'll have a leaderboard as well as break down a potential winner coming up this weekend in California. Those are just some of the things that we're following for you today on the show. And let's get started with the big news in the National Football League and the big news in college football as well. Jim Harbaugh makes it official. He is leaving the University of Michigan and headed to Los Angeles to take over the very talented but yet underperforming Los Angeles Chargers. You may remember Harbaugh, previously the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. After winning a national championship at Michigan, he is headed to sunnier skies, so to speak, in California. And very clearly at this point, Harbaugh leaving, Michigan will have a new head coach. By the way, Michigan with a new head coach, Washington with a new head coach, Alabama with a new head coach. All the teams that got into the playoff are dismantling their system, so to speak. I mean, maybe that's a little bit strong, but Harbaugh's out. We'll find out who's in shortly. Speaking of which, the Miami Dolphins make a surprise announcement yesterday. They are looking for a new defensive coordinator. Maybe it'll be the guy from San Diego or Los Angeles and Brandon Staley, as Vic Fangio wants to be closer to his family and is leaving the Dolphins as defensive coordinator and is going to become the Eagles' new defensive coordinator. Not the best defense, by the way, for the Dolphins last year. And now, naturally, everybody's throwing shade at Vic Fangio on the way out, but he has a great reputation of coaching defenses, also in Denver as well. Chiefs guard Joe Thuney's unlikely to play in the AFC Championship, one of the few players that has injury issues on the side of the Chiefs. Deebo Samuel, by the way, with that shoulder issue, did not practice yesterday. We'll see what ends up happening today. They have to get him going on Sunday. I don't know if San Francisco could win that game without him, but Deebo right now questionable for the game in the NFC Championship on Sunday. And also Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, scheduled for his second interview with the Seattle Seahawks today, former head coach, of course, with the Atlanta Falcons as well. The Atlantic Coast Conference releases their 2024 football schedule. My gosh, it is strange. Teams from California playing in the East, in the ACC, California and some others. Sort of bizarre. But we're going to see this all play out in this new world of college football that we are set to have, still about 6 months away from getting that going. The number 9 recruit Ryan Williams has recommitted to Alabama just 2 weeks after the 5-star wide receiver decommitted. So Alabama gets a player back after Nick Saban leaves. Michigan's offensive coordinator, Sharon Moore, it looks like he could be the next coach at the University of Michigan. We teased the possibility of something like that happening during our show. It happened yesterday. Doc Rivers ended up taking over Milwaukee. Maybe we'll get news on the new head coach at the University of Michigan later today. And also an agent felt that Iowa State's probe was illegal, according to testimony. Special agent Mark Ludwig, which was a state witness, testified that he was told by supervisors that the operation was strictly administrative and not criminal. So this probe continues with Iowa and Iowa State. Fascinating stuff. Okay, another coach in the National Basketball Association that they have seen enough of, Wes Unseld Jr. is out as Washington's head coach. He goes to the front office. If you're wondering, did he perform well as the head coach there? I don't know that it was his fault. They've been in rebuild mode, it feels like, for years. 77 wins, 130 losses. Brian Keefe, the assistant, is going to take over, at least for the time being. NBA has granted Grizzlies $12.4 million disabled player exception for Ja Morant, who's going to miss the rest of the season. They have until March 11th to use the exception, potentially with a trade or a sign-and trade or something along those lines. Last night in the National Basketball Association, you don't see this happen very often, and when it does, it's usually one of the biggest stars in the league. But there were fans that were heckling Luka Doncic, and he asked for the fan to be ejected. I don't know if you saw this video last night. They obliged, and they kicked him out of the game. You don't see that very often in the NBA. Also, South Carolina has been fined $100,000 for fans storming the court after their 79-62 win over Kentucky. A huge win, maybe the biggest win for them in almost 2 decades. Okay, big news. For those of you who live in the state of North Carolina, we got some official news yesterday. For those of you who are betting on sports and enjoy it, and potentially are looking forward to betting on the NCAA tournament, aka March Madness, which we specialize here in talking about, March 11th is the day that it goes live in North Carolina. Sam McQuillan will join us. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But we've got a firm date now, so any app that you download, potentially you'll be able to bet live on March the 11th. National Pickleball deal has signed with CBS Sports. The NPL will begin with an exclusive 2-hour special on January 31st at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Also, the Utah Jazz owners have requested to bring an NHL team to Utah. Ryan Smith in the league has been going on for a couple of years, and they hope to use the Delta Center, the home of the Jazz, as the interim home arena. And unfortunately, 5 NHL players are on leave amid London on sexual assault inquiry. 5 players from Canada's 2018 World Junior team has taken leaves of absence and have been asked to surrender to police. So that's the very latest going on in our world of sports and news. Now, for those of you who play fantasy football and are looking for an edge in daily fantasy for the AFC Championship and the NFC Championship, just a quick reminder, on Saturday morning, myself and Davis Maddock have you covered for our Saturday morning edition of Fantasy Sports Today. And in fact, if you're busy Saturday morning and you only have time for one show, you can check out Sunday, Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker. They have you covered, leading you right up until Pro Football Today. And then, of course, the AFC Championship, followed by the NFC Championship coverage with all of our hosts here on In-Game Live as well. And if you don't have the SportsGrid app, this is the best time to download it right now, because we've got all of the props coming up for the Super Bowl in just a couple of weeks, all of the opinions that we have. And this will tell you all about our shows, whether it's the early line, or Pharrell Coast to Coast, or In-Game Live, Game Time Decisions, information about my show here on NewsWire. There's the SportsGrid app. Just take out your phone, scan that QR code, and it's available in the iOS store and also Google Play as well. So SportsGrid app, by the way, how much does it cost? It's completely free to download right now if you want to go check it out. Okay, coming up next, we dive into the latest in the National Basketball Association. Matt Lutovsky talks football with us. He talks some basketball as well. We'll dive into the latest futures odds with the Milwaukee Bucks coaches, and also what the potential of them looks like in the future now with Doc Rivers, who has a long track record of getting his teams very far into the NBA playoffs, but sometimes getting upset before the end of the line. So we will dive into that as well. Also, don't forget, Sam McQuillan joins us coming up, and we'll talk about what North Carolina sports betting will look like coming up on March the 11th. So stay with us here on NewsWire on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish. We'll be back after these quick messages right after this break. Don't go away. Games of the year, Warren, on Sunday night, as the Chiefs are now headed back to a 6th championship game, an extremely fun, clean game, and then the hijinks ensue.
And I thought it was just irresponsible for him to take that deep shot into the end zone. I talked a lot about it on X. I thought that they should have hit that underneath route to Diggs. It was wide open. It would have been easily a first down.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Kyle Shanahan said after the game it was the same shoulder that made Deebo Samuel miss 2 games throughout this regular season in 2023.
Last time it was a scapular fracture. He missed a couple weeks. By video, we don't see that. It was the play that he got hit and had a head check. It's more believed to be a muscle injury. X-rays are proven to be negative. They're saying 50-50 right now.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
This will not end well in Milwaukee. They will flame out, there will be problems, and we will see what happens of who's the next domino to go. Does Giannis, who just signed an extension, ask out after a year? Do they move on from Dame? Or do they start blowing up some of the other guys, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, so on and so forth? It'll be worth watching.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network.
Well, look at the Heisman Trophy.
The Early Line.
And what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
NewsWire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell
backup quarterbacks.
coast to coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time
I
decisions.
have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took them
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was good
Late
betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Did like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting, ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Matt Lutovsky is with us. We're going to go over the latest in the National Basketball Association, including the coaching changes that have happened over the last 48 hours. Matt, thanks for coming on the program. And here we are again, another NBA season where teams feel like they're underperforming, making changes halfway through the year.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly teams move on nowadays in the NBA. And I mean, the Bucks have 3 coaches on their payroll, which tells you how quickly things move in the NBA for a team that won a championship just a couple years ago. So it's going to get crazy. It's only going to get crazier here as we start this stretch run, especially once the All-Star break kicks in.
Yeah, well, maybe you can explain it to me a little bit better because I thought Coach Mike Budenholzer did a great job for Milwaukee. And, you know, playoff appearances aside, it was a pretty stable organization. They let him go, and they bring in Adrian Griffin to coach. 43 games in, he's now let go. They've signed Doc Rivers to this epic contract that's going to take him through like the next 4 years or 3 years. And Matt, you know, like it's really interesting when we talk about like Kevin Durant and James Harden and LeBron James, and we don't mention Giannis really in those conversations. And I don't know why, to be honest with you, because it feels like this is similar. Does Giannis sort of get a pass for what's going on with all these coaching changes? Because I feel like if this happened with LeBron or someone else, we would be like, oh, Giannis can't get along with the coach and he wanted to make this happen. Or maybe I'm off here. Maybe it's not the situation there.
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of it depends on the player in terms of how much does the player get blamed for certain things like this. But yeah, when you have 3 coaches in the span of just a matter of months, you know the star player had something to do with it. I can't imagine he didn't. And I think, you know, with Bud, it was just that you can't lose in the first round when you're a team that's had the success they've had, even though it was kind of a weird year and Giannis did get hurt. But they lost in the first round, so they want to bring in a new voice. So they bring in Adrian Griffin. There's problems there from the start, specifically the preseason incident with assistant coach Terry Stotts, who's obviously very well respected. And then him leaving the team right before the start of the season, it just seemed weird. And then, you know, they make the Dame Lillard trade. And when you make a trade like that, you're committed to it. You have to make that work no matter what. So you look at the way their defense has fallen off this year. Well, that was bound to happen when you trade out defense, Drew Holiday, for offense, Dame Lillard. But I think they still expected it to be better than what it is. They're barely hanging on in the top 20 in defensive rating. And obviously there was friction within the team. The personalities weren't meshing for whatever reason. Someday, maybe someone will write a book about that, or at least a really long column that exposes some of the problems they had there. But you bring in a guy like Doc Rivers. He's known for being a great players coach. He's known for making it work and getting the best out of his teams and his players, at least until they're ahead 3-1 at some point in the conference semifinals, and then things tend not to go as well. But he does have a ring. He does have a championship pedigree, and we'll see if he can bring this team together because they certainly have the talent to get to the finals. The East is tough. There's a couple tough teams in their way, which I think we'll talk about in a second here with some of these future odds. But I think he's just trying to bring it all together, and they're trying to salvage this season so it doesn't go really south because they still have a couple more years of Dame.
Yeah, no, they do. And listen, they've played at a high level. As you mentioned, it's the first round losses that will get any coach fired in the NBA. And Matt, when you look at the Bucks' odds to win the championship in the East, I mean, you're getting, I don't know if you feel like they're going to win it, but if you are, this is the most value you're ever going to get with Milwaukee. I mean, generally speaking, they've been 2-1 or 3-1 to win the championship and even better to win the Eastern Conference. Certainly their win total could go either way. I mean, you never know how that's going to go at the end of the season, especially when some teams don't even care about the regular season anymore. So I would ask you, do you feel like there's some value here in taking them at their low spot? Because I don't think that if the Bucks play better, you're going to even see anywhere close to 4-1 for them to win the championship.
No, I think this is the best value you're going to get. And the nice thing about the Bucks is even when they play the Celtics, who are a better team and who are the favorites and rightly so, even arguably when they play the 76ers, and I'll say arguably on that because of how good Joel Embiid has been, but there's a good chance they're going to have the best player on the court. That goes a long way in an NBA series. They have a guy like Damian Lillard who can score with the best of them. Again, is the defense going to hold up against these other elite teams? It's tough to say, but they're a really good team. They have a shot. There's no question about it that they have a shot. They've been there before. They've gotten through it. They know what it takes. So I think when you look at the value, like you mentioned, that you can get with them right now to at least make it out of the East, it's there. It's good value. I don't think you're gonna get much better. I mean, maybe if they go on a little bit of a losing streak here, but at that point, do you want to bet on them? Because now you're really worried about them. So that's always what makes those situations tougher when you try to wait for better value. So I think this is a good spot right now. If you have any sort of faith in the Bucks, if you want to sprinkle a little bit on them, I think this is a good time.
All right, fair enough. Now let's look at the NBA's MVP, which last year at this time, we were all over the map with who could potentially win. I guess the question is, with Joel Embiid's performance over the last month, did he seal it up? Because Matt, we thought this was sealed up last year, and it was not. This switched around quite a bit. He's plus 130 to win. Jokic trying for another MVP at plus 250. I guess the name that I would circle here is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and what the potential could be for him down the stretch. I mean, he's never had shorter odds than I've seen here at plus 360, which tells me there's a chance, and then it falls off. Luka's 9-1, Giannis 12-1. So is it possible that a player that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as the others at SGA could win? Or is this Embiid's to lose at this point, coming off that 70-point performance?
Yeah, I think it's his to lose. I think the big thing, too, is he seems to want it. That was the issue with Jokic a little bit last year, is it didn't seem like he really wanted it. And why would, right? He's already won it. He was worried about the title, which he did wind up getting. You have to want MVP to a certain degree. The thing with Embiid, though, and this is the thing hanging over some players' heads for other types of postseason accolades, he's got to hit that games played threshold, and he's missed a fair amount of games already. And this might not be of his own doing. It might not be, because he wants to rest. Obviously, he's not going to rest his way out of an MVP award, but you don't know when an injury is going to strike. You don't know when he's this big dude, and when he's going to twist that ankle or tweak that hamstring, and he's going to need 2 weeks on the shelf, and next thing you know, he's not hitting the games played minimum. So you talk about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think that's great value for him. The guy's leading the number one team in the West. I think there's a decent chance they do finish as the top team in the West, and he's got the stats. I mean, 30 points a game. This guy does it all. That team's a very good team and has some other really good players, so it's not as if he's doing it all himself, but he's the unquestioned leader. He's unstoppable in crunch time, and I think he really does have a chance. It sounds a little bit weird to say right now, but I think he's a real interesting value bet, especially when you start factoring in that games played threshold for Embiid.
Yeah, that's a great rule. I thought that the NBA put in there, got to play a certain amount of games. Okay, so Embiid back tonight. What does he do for an encore? 76ers, 5.5-point favorites on the road at Indiana. Indiana's been missing Halliburton. I know that's always a tough injury. His status, obviously is very tough. Plus 5.5 tonight. Can Indiana keep this close? Total is 237.5. Usually I like to sell high after a guy like Embiid puts up a 70, but I don't know. This guy's like 30 points in the bag every single game.
He's automatic. And I think in a game like this, it's going to be fast paced. It's going to have a lot of possessions. I think he's going to put up the points. I think Philly's going to win this one comfortably. I just think he's on a mission. And the thing about Embiid that makes him so unique, at least among these big men scorers, is he's so good at the free throw line. It's just, what do you do with this guy? If you foul him, he's going to make the shots. He's going to hit that little elbow jumper. Obviously, we know what he can do in the paint. So I just think he's on a mission, and he's just one of these dudes, one of these hot streaks that we see from time to time that athletes go through in sports. And I just think he's going to keep killing it because he has that mentality too. So I like his over. I like the Sixers tonight. I like the cover. I like their over. Like, give it all to me until proven otherwise.
All right. Thanks again, Matt, for coming on. We'll catch up again next week.
I'd appreciate it.
All right, Matt Lutovsky with us. Coming up next, for those of you who live in North Carolina and like to bet on sports, you're probably a big college basketball fan. Guess what? You'll be able to bet on the NCAA tournament. We'll tell you why. One of the best games of the year, Warren, on Sunday night, as the Chiefs are now headed back to a 6th championship game. An extremely fun, clean game, and then the hijinks ensue.
And I thought it was just irresponsible for him to take that deep shot into the end zone. I talked a lot about it on X. I thought that they should have hit that underneath route to Diggs. He was wide open. It would have been easily a first down.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Kyle Shanahan said after the game it was the same shoulder that made Deebo Samuel miss 2 games throughout this regular season in 2023.
Last time it was a scapular fracture. He missed a couple weeks. By video, we don't see that. It was the play that he got hit and had a head check. It's more believed to be a muscle injury. X-rays are proven to be negative. They're saying 50-50 right now.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
This will not end well in Milwaukee. They will flame out. There will be problems, and we will see what happens of who's the next domino to go. Does Giannis, who just signed an extension, ask out after a year? Do they move on from Dame? Or do they start blowing up some of the other guys, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, so on and so forth? It'll be worth watching.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy,
The early line,
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon, not bought at the deadline.
NewsWire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell,
backup quarterbacks.
coast to coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live,
Just
prime time.
yard for a grand slam.
In the bottom of the 4th inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
late
good betting.
night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Did like the 2.5. Jumped on.
There's no taking weeks off in golf betting, ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Got the good news yesterday for folks living in North Carolina and watching our show, streaming us. Sam McQuillan's got some good news to deliver. I don't know if I should let the cat out of the bag here. I feel like people know by now, probably, Sam, but I guess good news for people who like basketball in a very popular college basketball state in the ACC. The NCAA tournament is going to happen, and people who live in the state are going to be able to bet on it. So let's dive into it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Craig, I appreciate you letting me be the bearer of good news for once instead of the sometimes troubling news we can talk about with people's favorite apps shutting down. But North Carolina officially has a start date for online sports betting, which obviously was legalized last year, and we've been wondering when it's going to happen. It's March 11th of this year, which is, it's kind of crazy to look at the calendar, just 2 months away, less than 2 months, and just in time for the ACC tournament, which obviously there are some prominent North Carolina schools playing in that, Duke, UNC among those. So people are excited that, this is going to happen in time for March Madness as well. You had originally in the law, it was written where the latest possible they could do was in the middle of June, I believe, which obviously would have missed a big window. We've seen some other states that kind of missed the Super Bowl launch area. Usually that's what you want, or pre-NFL season. We've seen them target a big event like March Madness, which obviously attracts a lot of betting and handle and interest from everyone. Especially, it's going to be pretty big in North Carolina, not just because you have the college interest, but also because you can bet on colleges in North Carolina, unlike a lot of other states, and that includes in-state colleges. A few years ago when they were thinking about legalizing, that was a big sticking point of, are we going to allow no college betting at all, just some college betting? So they've got that figured out. And there's about 9 sports books that have applied already through partnership in-state teams to be able to offer online sports betting on March 11th. Those include BetMGM, Bet365, DraftKings, ESPN Bet, Fanatics, FanDuel, Underdog, which would be launching its sportsbook only product, and then Caesars, as well as a casino in Catawba, North Carolina. Hope I'm saying that right. And there's still a few spots left open because of the state law. It was actually rewritten after it was passed to require basically sportsbooks to pay teams partnership fees in order to come in the state. The Panthers and Charlotte FC, as well as a few other smaller Charlotte-based teams, have licenses open. So it could be, more than 9. There's about 18 potential, I believe. And so we'll have to see what happens there. And in the first year, it's expected to be pretty big once it reaches maturity, which would be about $6.8 billion in handle that we're expecting from North Carolina once it goes online. That would be about 5th most, I believe, behind states like Pennsylvania, New York, obviously, New Jersey, and Nevada. So it'd be pretty big. It's a pretty big state. Obviously, the college basketball interests. So I think it'll be good for sports books, which honestly have not had that much to look forward to this year in terms of launching new states and boosting the revenue that way. So it's going to be good for, brands relying on new customer signups and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, it is great news, and I can't wait for that day that they launch North Carolina. I wasn't sure who would be launching in 2024, Sam, to be honest with you. But at least we got one state in the books. Okay, now let's get over to another peculiar story in sports betting. And I don't know that we have enough time in the segment to sort of break down everything that has happened with Barstool leaving Penn and Penn taking over ESPN, and now Barstool not being the book, but being with the book. So, I mean, look, it's a lot of confusion as far as I am concerned. And by the way, I'm surprised that this quickly Barstool has pivoted over to DraftKings from Penn. But maybe you can, in 2 minutes or less, sort of siphon through the big news from this story.
Yeah, I'll do my best. You're right. It is a very interesting story with all these twists and turns. But essentially, if I told you 6 months ago that Barstool would be partnering with a gambling brand that was not named Penn, you would have looked at me like I'm crazy, because Penn had just, finished spending $500 million to buy the brand. Barstool Sportsbook was Penn's online sports betting app in like 15 states, and they had committed a huge amount of money. It was integrated in all their podcasts and everything. Then all of a sudden, Penn decided, you know what, this isn't it for us. We're only getting 4% market share. We're moving on to ESPN, which they're now paying $2 billion for to basically use their name and do kind of the same thing. Sold Barstool back for $1, As part of that, there was this non-compete clause where Barstool wouldn't be able to partner with another gambling company. Now it appears, according to Sportico, we have Barstool moving on already to DraftKings. Their reports are that they're potentially in talks to do a gambling affiliate deal where basically Barstool advertises their odds. Supposedly it's in the low 8 figures, which is around $10 million, only a fraction of what DraftKings has paid companies like Meadowlark Media, and FanDuel has paid companies like The Ringer to do similar kind of marketing deals. So early reactions are that this is just kind of a no-brainer good move for DraftKings, and it seems like the stock market agrees. DraftKings climbed about 4% yesterday right after this news broke, and Penn in turn fell about 3.7% on the day. So initially, it's just kind of seen as, wow, I can't believe that the non-compete only lasted 6 months. Maybe this could eat into some of the customers that Penn took over with it from Barstool to ESPN. We'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, just a really fascinating story here. Another twist and turn in the whole Barstool Penn saga, and DraftKings sort of getting involved. It seems like they like to get involved when, companies like PointsBet and Fanatics are talking about, merging and jacking up the price there. So not surprising to see that Barstool was the brand trying to take advantage of this situation. And it'll be interesting to see once we get more reports and more details come out over the next few months.
All right, let's end, speaking of merger, with PointsBet and Fanatics. PointsBet getting out of the United States landscape, Fanatics taking over, and they've done it again now in Pennsylvania. And Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the final step in their conversion over, is it not?
Yeah, Craig, you got that right. Fanatics is now live with sports betting in Pennsylvania using the PointsBet app, PointsBet license that they had acquired. And it had been branded as PointsBet a Fanatics experience when they were trying to figure out the needs of, getting it over to their own app. But now it's officially the PointsBet app, officially the Fanatics app. So Fanatics now has their own app in 11 states, and they've done that since the beginning of the NFL season. There's still a few states where it's operating under PointsBet, including New York, Michigan, 2 others that I can't think of right now. But essentially, this is just them putting the finishing touches on that. They acquired the PointsBet business, which is an Australian company, their U.S. business, for $225 million earlier this year, which was kind of after they had already planned to get into sports betting. But once PointsBet went up for sale, this seemed like a no-brainer to them to not only accelerate the number of states that they would go in for a move like this, but also accelerate the technology and the product, because PointsBet, despite it not getting, the success it had hoped for in the U.S., it is the owner of a lot of interesting brands like Bainick and Odds Factory, which, Fanatics believes is going to really help it get out to the forefront of live in-play betting capabilities. All that's going to be realized a little later on. We're seeing Fanatics still trying to flip over licenses in new states. Obviously, companies like DraftKings and FanDuel are present in nearly 30 states. They're only in about half of that. So they're in a different phase right now than the other top 2 competitors, only holding about 1.1% of handle share in December, which is like 6th or 7th in the U.S. So there's still a long way for them to go. But, if you remember, the CEO, Michael Rubin, sold his stakes in the New Jersey Devils and the Philadelphia 76ers in order to be able to do this sports betting thing, this iGaming thing. Obviously, conflict of interest with the league would have prevented him, from holding on to that. So it's a big commitment they have. Fanatics has a lot of cash on hand. It's a pretty interesting product if you've gotten to look at it so far. But this is just the next step in their phase. And I'd expect more states to get flipped. And Pennsylvania is obviously a big one. It's about 4th in handle every year. So things are going in the right direction for them so far in terms of that. And we'll have to see what shakes out next from this whole merging process.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely the one company that when they first decided to take over PointsBet, you wondered, hey, look, still fighting with some of these other, sports betting operators. Could they succeed? And I guess, Sam, we can end with kind of this. Do you think in 2024 that a similar deal will happen where one of the bigger companies, whether it's FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, sort of absorb one of the other sports betting operators? Because as we're seeing is all of the sports betting major operators are really condensed at this point. Like at some point I thought we would have 15 or 20. It feels like it's only like 4 or 5 that are going to be able to survive this when it's all said and done.
Yeah, they're extremely condensed at this point, which, makes me wonder, like, who would be bought at this point? Companies like BetMGM, Caesars, who are kind of on the fringe, looking on the outside end of the top two. You don't really think that these big, huge land-based casino companies would abandon it so quickly. PointsBet was a little different because it was an Australian company that came in. So I'd have to, wonder who that company would be that they bought. Now, is it going to be perhaps a company like Rush Street Interactive, which doesn't have a huge market share and they're able to get it at a low price? That could be something that plays out. And certainly I would expect companies to look towards South America too, where some of these other competitors have maybe done a little bit better job and they could get a lower price there. But it's just hard to think about who would be selling at this point. We have a lot of new people emerge and a lot of legacy operators with land-based casinos probably hesitant to get out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Sam, great to catch up with you once again here on NewsWire. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks, Greg.
All right. Sam McQuillan, LegalSportsReport.com. Coming up next, Ben Stevens previews the AFC Championship, and our buddy Brady Kannon is back in the house to preview the Farmers Insurance Tournament going on this weekend, which is underway. We'll even give you a leaderboard. Don't go away. Games of the year, Warren, on Sunday night as the Chiefs are now headed back to a sixth championship game, an extremely fun, clean game, and then the hijinks ensue.
And I thought it was just irresponsible for him to take that deep shot into the end zone. I talked a lot about it on X. I thought that they should have hit that underneath route to Diggs. It was wide open. It would have been easily a first down.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Kyle Shanahan said after the game it was the same shoulder that made Deebo Samuel miss 2 games throughout this regular season in 2023.
Last time it was a scapular fracture. He missed a couple weeks. By video, we don't see that. It was the play that he got hit and had a head check. It's more believed to be a muscle injury. X-rays are proven to be negative. They're saying 50-50 right now.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
This will not end well in Milwaukee. They will flame out, there will be problems, and we will see what happens of who's the next domino to go. Does Giannis just sign an extension, ask out after a year? Do they move on from Dame? Or do they start blowing up some of the other guys, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, so on and so forth? It'll be worth watching.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy
The early line.
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
NewsWire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks, backup
Pharrell
quarterbacks.
coast to coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time
I have
decisions.
no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took them
time.
yard
for a grand slam.
In the bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was good
late
betting.
night.
We waited for a 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Did like a 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting, ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. Not sure if you're aware of this, but on Sunday, there's the AFC Championship game that's going to get played. It's true. Ben Stevens has been talking about it all week long on the early line, and he's got a preview of the Chiefs and Ravens for us here on the show.
Craig, there are the narratives entering Conference Championship Sunday. Then there are the numbers. We examine both as we get prepared for the AFC title game in Baltimore between the Ravens and the Chiefs. Let's start with those narratives. Lamar Jackson, just a 2-3 postseason record in his NFL career, now appearing in his first ever AFC Championship game. The number 1 overall seed, the Baltimore Ravens, will host this AFC Championship game in the Charm City on Sunday afternoon. All 6 years for Patrick Mahomes as the starting quarterback in Kansas City, the Chiefs have reached the AFC title game 6 consecutive seasons. But the big difference this time around, Craig, is this game is in Baltimore. The previous 5 AFC championship matchups Kansas City has played in have all been in KC, hosted inside Arrowhead Stadium. Of course, last week in Buffalo was Patrick Mahomes' first career road playoff start. He won that game outright, booked as an underdog. That's where the Chiefs are here, getting 3.5 points, plus 165 on the money line. In Patrick Mahomes' career, Craig, as we dive into those numbers, since he became the starter for the Chiefs in 2018 under center, Kansas City has been booked as an underdog now 13 times. Kansas City is 8-5 straight up as an underdog in those 13 contests. They are the only team in the National Football League in the last 6 NFL seasons to have a winning record outright as an underdog. The Ravens, comfortable as a favorite this year, booked as the favorite side in 15 of 18 games now. The flock overall, 10-5 against the spread, but even more than that, Craig, a 3.5-point number in favor of Lamar and his Ravens. When Baltimore has been booked as a 4-point favorite or less, that's 6 games this year, they are a perfect 6-0 against the spread. Total opened at 44.5, and that's where it remains. Baltimore barely over their total in the divisional round. It closed at 43 and a hook, 44 points. Baltimore scored 34, did not allow a single offensive touchdown to Houston. They won that game 34-10. Kansas City, the big difference as well, Craig, not just being away for the AFC Championship game, but a better defense. Second best in the NFL all year in terms of scoring defense. The flock, that top scoring unit in all of the National Football League. But Kansas City last week allowed 24 points to the Bills in the opening 3 quarters, then stood tall in that 4th and final stanza. But it did snap an 8-game streak where KC's defense had held its opponent to 20 points or less. That's why you see a relatively low total, 44 in a hook for the first of the 2 games on Conference Championship Sunday. It's the AFC title matchup in Baltimore. The Ravens, a 3.5-point favorite against the Chiefs.
All right, thanks very much, Ben. True story from this past weekend, by the way. Generally speaking, I go with my gut. I go with my opinion. But before the games began last weekend, after I had such a bad divisional round, I'm like, let me text Brady Kannon and just tell him what I'm thinking for the weekend and see if he's just going to shoot me down on my picks. I was like, Brady, I don't know. I like Green Bay. I like the over in Detroit. He's like, no, you're on it. You got. I think you got the right picks there. Brady gave me hit. I mean, my gosh, if we combined our picks last weekend in that text message with parlays, we would have done very well last week. So thanks for that, Brady. And I'm feeling much better going into the NFL weekend. But here's the problem. I got to get my golf picks from you first, man. We're in golf season now. I mean, I'm ready to move on from the NFL.
Yeah, we're getting close. The transition is upon us for sure. And we're coming up on some very big golf tournaments. I mean, we're here at Torrey Pines. We were talking about it before we came on, that this is now the 3rd year in a row that they've adjusted to get out of the way of the NFL Championship Sunday. I think it's a brilliant strategy on the part of the PGA Tour. They've adjusted their entire schedule 5 or 6 years ago to stay out of the limelight of the NFL. And I think it's a brilliant move. But we've got the Pebble Beach tournament coming up next week during the Super Bowl bye week. I also think it's very smart that they've made that a signature event. You know, these events that the tour has now where all the top players show up, and that'll be at Pebble Beach next week. So a good time for the PGA Tour to capture a lot of the viewership. So they're playing it very smart. I've got a few guys in the mix after day one. Of course, they play the South Course and the North Course at Torrey Pines. Every player will play one of each on Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday will be all the South Course. The South Course is much more difficult. It was 2.25 strokes harder than the North Course on Wednesday. And if you look at that leaderboard, like there's only one guy in the top 18 or something like that played the South Course on Wednesday. And I believe that's my guy, Nikolai Højgaard. So I'm feeling very good about the fact that he was able to go low on the more difficult golf course. Højgaard is one of my guys. I've got Shane Lowry. I've got Harris English and Tony Finau. Finau is another guy that did pretty well, shot 3 under on the South Course. So going forward, if you're looking at making a bet at this point, I would take a look at a guy that did pretty well on the South Course on Wednesday, because today they will now go to the easier course and possibly pad some of those birdies, and creep up higher on the leaderboard. Whereas the other guys, the Patrick Cantlays and, Kevin Yu, these guys at the top of the leaderboard, they're set to play the more difficult golf course today. They could shoot even par. They could shoot over par. So I like the guys that are, off to a good start and headed to the easier golf course today. You might take a look at Xander Schauffele and Tony Finau to possibly win this event. Finau at about 20-1, Xander around 8 or 10-1. And then a couple of guys a little deeper. Maybe you look at a top 10 finish or something for Austin Eckroat. Really playing well right now and shot 4 under on the South Course on Wednesday. And then Sungjae Im, he's 1 over par, but he'll play the easier North Course today and could very well get himself right back into the mix. He might shoot 6 under today, and he's set up at 5 under par heading into the weekend. And this guy's had good success at this golf course in the past.
So let's, before we go to the NFL, let's break down what we've seen thus far. And as you mentioned, this is going to end Saturday. So I would ask you this, Brady, is that last week we saw a little insanity with nobody picking the winner on last week's tournament on the golf course. Do you think that is because of the early part of the season, the lack of participation, maybe some of the players going over to play in live, or is this just going to correct itself as we move forward on the PGA Tour? Because my gosh, if we could hit like 50-1s or 100-1s in these big tournaments, like that was an incredible feat last week.
Yeah, I mean, the PGA Tour season has started off that way. Chris Kirk, the first week, was anywhere from 150 to 200-1. Grayson Murray was 400 or 500-1 at the Sony Open. And then the amateur, I mean, he was anywhere from 300 to 500-1. So, I mean, these triple digits have dominated the first 3 weeks. And, at the Sentry at Kapalua, that's a loaded field. And Chris Kirk is obviously a class player. But you would have expected a different type of name. Kirk is really not the type of player to win that tournament. He's more really suited for the Sony. And then Grayson Murray, comes out of nowhere. And of course, it was the ultimate, out of the dark or in the dark shot last week with the amateur. And the American Express is a birdie fest. You're going to get more randomness. I think it will correct itself this week, Craig. This is a big boy golf course. Torrey Pines, the South Course specifically, has hosted 2 U.S. Opens. Tiger wins it in 2008, Jon Rahm in 2021. I think you're going to get a pretty class player win here. Now, we have seen, some one-offs, or if you will, Luke List a couple of years ago won here. But, you've also had Jason Day a couple of times, Brandt Snedeker a couple of times, Tiger's won here multiple times, Mickelson, Bubba Watson. So, Justin Rose, this usually goes to a pretty accomplished player because of the difficulty of the golf course. And I think we'll probably get something, if not in that category, something close to that this week.
All right. And again, the tournament finale Saturday, AFC, NFC Championship Sunday. Let's focus in on that now with you, Brady, where these lines are just super tight. Like this is the pinnacle of sports betting here, trying to get 50% on each side here. I'm a little surprised you can still get 3.5 with the Chiefs. It scares me a little bit, honestly, as we keep going on in the week, that this is just stuck on 3.5. The total is 44.5. And so, look, I haven't made my final decision on this, Brady, but you can kind of sense where I'm leaning here. like, it's just really hard for me not to take these points. But maybe I'm like off in my thinking here. I'm just a line guy. Like if I see the line stuck on 3.5 by the time Sunday comes, I may go to Baltimore here because it's sort of telling me, hey, Craig, you're on the wrong side. Is that
right?
the thinking
Exactly.
here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great observation. And, that's something I think you can look at throughout the entire NFL season. If a line is stuck at 3.5, they're not taking the dog. And we have here in Las Vegas, there's actually 2 shops that have gone to 4, including a couple of very sharp stores in the South Point and the Circa. And I've seen a couple offshore as well go to 4. My power ratings came to 4. When I run the stats, I come to Ravens by 4. I think there maybe is, you can't ignore it, but, the storyline that Mahomes as an underdog, let's not forget, this is the 2nd straight road game for the Kansas City Chiefs. The last 7 games of the season, I'm going to throw out week 18. The last 7 games prior to week 18, the Chiefs went 3-4. They lost to the Bills. They lost to the Eagles. They lost to the Raiders. They lost to the Packers. And then you move forward to the playoffs, and they get probably the worst possible team you could imagine, a warm weather team going into frigid temperatures with an injury-riddled defense in the Miami Dolphins. And so the Chiefs look awful strong in that game. Then they go to take on Buffalo, another team riddled with injury on defense, and the Bills should have beaten them. They nearly lost that game. So in the public eye, it kind of appears that the Chiefs have flipped the switch, but I don't really think that's the case. I still think they're the same Kansas City Chiefs that have struggled offensively throughout the season and happen to, fall into a couple really good, fortunate situations, unfortunate for the other teams, their opponents, that had injury. The Baltimore Ravens are healthy. They should have Mark Andrews and Marlon Humphrey back. The way to beat the Chiefs is with the rushing attack. Baltimore, no better candidate to do that. I think that'll open up the passing game for Lamar Jackson. He may rush for 70, 80, 100 yards in this game. I wouldn't be surprised. I kept it simple, Craig, and I played the Ravens on a money line parlay, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they covered the spread.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one. And then we get, I guess the main course is going to be Sunday night, Lions and 49ers. Really tough to call this one, too. We don't even know if Debo's going to play. I mean, I assume he is, but I know how much of a factor he is in this game. But, for me, again, Detroit scores and they can't stop anyone. I'm not an over-better guy. I know that that's usually the pros versus the Joes. The Joes are taking the over here, but it's hard for me to get talked out of taking the over in this game.
I'm with you, Craig. I think the Niners will be able to score. You mentioned that Detroit defense. That's a liability. It really has been all season long. But I also think the Lions will be able to score. I think they'll be able to get their running game going. I kept it simple and took the points out of this one and took the Niners on the money line as well. I paired them with the Ravens in a money line parlay, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners won by double digits.
All right, Brady, thanks for coming on. Games of the year, Warren, on Sunday night as the Chiefs are now headed back to a 6th championship game, an extremely fun, clean game, and then the hijinks ensue.
And I thought it was just irresponsible for him to take that deep shot into the end zone. I talked a lot about it on X. I thought that they should have hit that underneath route to Diggs. He was wide open. It would have been easily a first down.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Kyle Shanahan said after the game it was the same shoulder that made Deebo Samuel miss 2 games throughout this regular season in 2023.
Last time it was a scapular fracture. He missed a couple weeks. By video, we don't see that. It was the play that he got hit and had a head check. It's more believed to be a muscle injury. X-rays are proven to be negative. They're saying 50-50 right now.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
This will not end well in Milwaukee. They will flame out. There will be problems, and we will see what happens of who's the next domino to go. Does Giannis just sign an extension, ask out after a year? Do they move on from Dame? Or do they start blowing up some of the other guys, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, so on and so forth? It'll be worth watching.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy.
The Early Line.
And what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
NewsWire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell,
backup quarterbacks.
coast to coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime time.
Yard for a grand slam.
In the bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
that was
late
good betting.
night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Did like the 2.5. Jumped on.
There's no taking weeks off in golf betting, ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Well, you don't see this happen very often in sports where a coach and a player have an interaction, and not just once, but twice. So, again, I don't follow soccer as closely as some others, but this is the head coach of Union Berlin. His name is Nedad Belika, and he was sent off for twice, not once, but twice, pushing a forward in the face. It's the Bayern Munich forward Leroy Sané in the face in a Bundesliga encounter on Wednesday. Apparently, he didn't like the effort that the player was showing. So as you can see there, or if you're listening, you can't see, but I'll describe it. He's like basically taking his hand and putting it in his upper chin or upper face. And he didn't just do it once. I watched the video. He like went at him a second time here for effort. Now, look, he apologized after. Very, very vociferous in his apology, saying, hey, I was completely wrong. I let myself get out of hand. But, I mean, I don't know. Is this going to cost him his job? Still remains to be seen. Word to the wise for all of you coaches out there with young kids. It's putting the hands on the kids is not acceptable. 20, 30 years ago, maybe this was happening behind the scenes. But in these day and age of video and social media, and this is all going to get out, you're going to lose your job. Best to just walk away and try and de-escalate the situation. Instead, this coach looks like he was escalating the situation on the soccer pitch. So we will end there. No hand to my face today, but a good show, I thought. What'd you guys think? Okay, thanks again to Matt Lutovsky for coming on from Sporting News. Also, thanks to our friend Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report, Brady Kannon. Of course, his preview of golf, always exemplary, in addition to Ben Stevens with his AFC Championship preview. I guess Ben will be back tomorrow with the NFC Championship preview. Also, thanks to our associate producer, Michael Cohen, our producer, Sam Yarnell. I'm Craig Mish. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day as we're inching closer to that AFC and NFC Championship. But don't worry, Pharrell is back in the house today, 3 o'clock Eastern, covering college basketball, hockey, NBA as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll get our positions from Moore and Sharp on the games coming up. Have a great day, everyone.